Welcome back to Excel HQ, everyone. This is the final video of our tutorial series where we will be going over some more advanced features such as slicers, data validation, pivot tables, macros, and a small introduction to VBA. First, I highly recommend you watch the first two tutorial videos if you're still new to Excel. However, for others who have been using Excel for a while, this will be a great video for you, a refresher, and hopefully you'll learn something new. And to start off here, we have this table illustrating shifts, supervisors on the shifts, the amount of hours they worked, if they worked overtime, the total hours they worked, and this is just for a week. We have week 1 here, and then their total compensation for that week, and then the normal rate and the overtime rate will be illustrated above here. And the first thing we are going to go over are slicers. And what are slicers? Well, they are quick filtering add-on interfaces. So as you can see on the right here, they're just little buttons that pop up on your Excel sheet, and it just allows you to filter them and have a good view of what you're filtering and what is being filtered together. They're movable filtering interfaces opposed to the filter buttons locked to columns on rows, and they're the preferred method of filtering large amounts of data. The more filtering needed, the more useful they usually are because you're able to see what exactly is always being filtered. In order to insert a slicer into your Excel sheet, you'll want to tap on your table and then go to Insert in the ribbon above, and then in the Filters group over here, you'll find Slicer. You'll want to click on that, and then it will show you all of your headers for your table, and then you can choose which ones you want to include. So for right now, I'm going to include shift and overtime hours. I'll press OK on that, and then it automatically creates the interfaces for me. I'll slide them over here, and then I can easily filter out just by clicking, and it will include all of the A, and then if I click this one, all of the B, and then all of the C. However, right now it's only allowing me to do one at a time. If I wanted to include more, I could use this button with the check marks right here for multi-select, and then I could click B, and it'll show me A and B, and then all of them again, and then it will just go back. And they also cross over on each other, so for example, if I wanted to take out all of the A and take out all of the B and just have C, and then the overtime hours, I just wanted to see who worked a full 8 hours after that. I can also multi-select here and then select every single other one besides 8 off. And it's just a very easy way to see exactly what you have filtered, especially when you have multiple of these up and you can see exactly what you're looking at. Now I'm going to clear the filters by selecting this button right here. Clear those, clear that. And then the table will just go right back to normal. Allow me to get rid of these. And now we are going to go into data validation and what it is. A few things data validation does is it ensures that proper data is being entered into a select number of cells, so you can choose what is valid and is allowed to go into a certain cell and what is invalid. It allows you to create a list or parameters of what is allowed to be entered, and it also allows the user to display custom messages in certain cells to go along with certain settings. Now, the best example I can give you of data validation, and which I think would be the most useful for you guys, is using a list, a drop-down menu. So if you need to find data validation, you'll go into your ribbon here, and then under the data ribbon, you'll go to data tools, and then there's this symbol here that represents data validation. It might be a bit bigger if you're on a monitor. You want to click on that, and then what should pop up is the settings, input, message, error alert. And before we get into that, I'm going to make a list because as you can see right here, you have to put in your criteria, and you can have any value, whole number, decimal, all the way down. But 99% of the time, I'm going for a list, and you'll see what I mean by that for a second. So in the shift column, I only ever want A, B, and C, right? I never want D or E whenever a new person is entered or whatnot. So I could create a list on a different sheet, but right now I'm just going to put it right to the side right here. So I'll just go A here, B here, C here. And then I'll highlight all the cells that I want the validation to apply to. So I'll go down here, highlight the entire table for shift, and then I'll go back up to the data validation symbol and click on it. And then for my criteria, I'm going to click on list, And then I'm going to specify that list here. So I'll just click and drag here, and then I'll press OK. Now, in every single one of these small cells right here, there's going to be a small little arrow next to it, which is just my drop-down filter. So I'll have A, I'll have B, I'll have C, so on. I'm just going to bring that back to what it was, and then go back up to this one. And another cool thing you could do with data validation is you could just change your input message or error alert. Because right now, if I try to put D and press enter, this is what's going to pop up. And then I'll have to retry it or go about something different or just take it out of the cell completely. I'll put my A back in there. And you can change that error message if you want to. And just go to the error alert. And you can have different styles. Stop, warning, information. If you do information, it just lets people know that there's a drop-down list. It doesn't necessarily stop them. So the most useful one would probably be the stop, because it doesn't actually allow anything that is incorrect and not in the list to ever be there. So I could be like shifts for my title and an error message. Please insert A, B, or C here. I'll press OK on that. And then in this data validation, if I type in D once again, press enter, it will then give me the error message that I wrote in myself. And the same thing works for input messages. However, it's very nice because it shows it right away. So on the cell, once again, I'll go back to data validation. And it's only going to do it for this cell because I don't have every single one highlighted. But if I want an input message just for somebody to see something right before they click something, I'll just go to input message. And then my title again will be shifts. And then the input message would be A, which would equal day shift. I'll have B be my afternoon shift. And then I'll have C be my midnights. I'll press OK on that. And then it will just pop up right in the cell. As soon as I click it, I'll click off of it. It's no longer there. I click on the cell with the data validation, and it just shows me that right away. It's not going to show me that for these because I didn't have them highlighted, but just highlight the range that you want and then do all that data validation all at once, or else, because A is different than all of these other ones, it's giving me this error right now, but I would have to take it out completely. But just highlight all the cells you need to apply to first, and then go through your settings, your input message, your error alert, and you can create something that is very useful like this. People will not be typing in the wrong thing here. And now onto the pivot table and what it is. A pivot table is just an improvement on a real table where you can easily choose and filter out what information from the main table you want to keep. It allows you to compare snippets of the data in ways that you can't with a regular table, and it will provide numerous ways to format and represent your data. For example, if we wanted to insert a pivot table, we would just click on any cell of our current table, and then go to the Insert ribbon, and then click on Pivot Table, which should be on the far left. And you can name your table. I'm just going to keep it as Table 1 right now, and then choose where you want it, whether on this worksheet or a new one. I'm going to go onto a new worksheet. I'll press OK there, and this is what you'll see for any pivot table you make right away. And then on the right side, it should bring up your fields, and your fields will be your headers for your previous table. So here I have shift supervisors to total compensation, and then in the pivot table field list, they become the fields here. And below the field list, you'll see the filters, the columns, the rows, and the values. And that is what's going to make up your pivot table. So the main difference would be in this table, you're viewing every header at the same time, and you can filter, which is nice. However, you still have all the other headers. In the pivot table, you can just choose one or two headers to compare only two spots of information at a time, and it's really helpful that way. So for example, if I take shift and I put it in the rows area down here, it will make my rows the shift, so A, B, C. And then over top of that, let's say I'll put total hours. So I want to know how many total hours were worked on each shift. And then for the values, it would, in this case, be a count. So anything that counts how many people were there. So the supervisors would work the shifts would work, because it counts all of my cells from 5 all the way down to 106. It's just how many values, how many people there were working. I could use supervisors, but you could also use shifts or hours worked, whatever fills out your table completely. In this case, I'll put supervisors for the values, and it's just going to be a count of every supervisor once again. So we have a grand total of 102 supervisors, which is right. However, if I take that out of the values and then put in shift there too, it's still the same thing. It's just the count of how many people were there. And then you get a great pivot table that just illustrates the number of hours you have, 0, 24, 32 to 48, and the grand total of people in each one. However, we don't really need this. It's not really relevant right now. So I can right click on the column of the grand total, and then I'll go down here and then press remove grand total, and that will just get rid of that. And here I can see very concisely each shift, and then how many supervisors on each shift worked how many hours. So one supervisor on shift A worked 0 hours that week, and one for shift B, and then one on each shift worked 48 hours that week. And that's how pivot tables are so great compared to a normal table. And some other fantastic things about pivot tables is that when you right click on them, you'll be shown a bunch of new options that you wouldn't have originally on normal tables, such as summarize values by, show values as, and it just gives you different ways to format your data to be represented the best. So if you wanted a percentage of your grand total, a percentage of your column total or the row total, and then summarize values by, it doesn't necessarily have to be a count. In this case, because I put in supervisors as my value in the field list, it does have to be a count. But if I had numbers too, I could use sum or average. And then there's other things such as show details, value field settings, and pivot table options. There are plenty of options, which I recommend you go through by yourself, because it would take me all day to go through them all, and you most likely won't need to know a lot of them anyways. And if you need the field list to show up on the right side again, and you're clicking on your pivot table and you're not getting that, you'll just need to go up into the ribbon tab, and then you'll find pivot table analyze. And if you just click on that, on the far right, the field list button, you'll want to click on that, and it will bring back your field list for you. So right now, I'm going to take out the count of supervisors from my values area, and then I'm going to put back in total compensation. Now you'll see when I go to summarize values by, it's no longer as a count, but it's by sum. And then I could also do show values as, and if I do percentage of a grand total, it will show me everything here that's added up to 100%, and the percentage of the grand total, and it would make sense that all of these are 1.34 because it's all 48 hours and the wages are the same. And also, for one last thing, if you want to make your fields look different, there's this little settings icon right here that if you click on, you can just format it differently here. Not very important, but something neat if you want to know it. And that is pretty much it for pivot tables. They're really helpful for just comparing small parts of a larger table, and I really recommend that you start using these if you're not already. Now let me introduce you to macros, and what they are is it's a series of actions set out by the user, you, which can be performed all at once. It allows the series of actions to be linked to a keyboard shortcut, making it easily accessible to execute instead of having to do it over and over again. And what it actually is, it has code running in the background that executes when you run the macro, except it writes the code for you when you record the macro. Of course, you can just write small ones yourself. And it writes the codes for you, so there's no need to learn it yourself. And it is very easy to implement. We'll get into VBA a bit later, but in order to use VBA, you might need to know how to code a bit. However, if you're not interested in that at all and just want to use macros in a way that normal Excel features don't allow you to do things, macros is the way for you. Now, the first thing you'll need to execute macros is you'll need this developer tab in your ribbon up here. If you do not have a developer tab right up there right now, you'll just need to simply go to File, and then under File, you'll go down to Options. And then in your options, you'll want to go to Customize Ribbon, and you might not have developer checked off with the other few. However, you'll just need to check that off one time and then press OK. And it should start showing up in your ribbon now. And in the ribbon, you'll see Visual Basic, macros, record macros, use relative references, macro security. This is all part of your macros. It's all part of your code in the code group. And basically, to record a macro, you're just going to click on this button right here. And it's just a series of steps that you want to do over and over again. Now, to start you off with a quick, easy example, I'm just going to type in the word Excel in cell K2 right here, and then we'll start doing things to it. So I'll click off of that, and then you'll want to click Record Macro. And what's going to pop up here is your macro name. Right now I'm on my third macro, so I'm just going to keep the name macro3. It doesn't really matter right now. And the shortcut key is whatever keyboard combination you want to combine it to. I'm on Windows right now, so I'm going to use the Control-Shift-D. And when I press Shift-D, it will automatically have the shift in there for you. If you're on Mac, I think it's Command. However, it's very similar. And this is just going to be the keyboard combination that you have it linked to. Make sure you don't link it to something that you already have. So for example, if I just put Z in here, that wouldn't be good because that's what undo is, and I use that a lot. So I'll do something I'll never use, and I don't even know if something exists for it already, so I'll just go Control-Shift-D. And then right now is just where you want to specify you store it. You could store it across multiple workbooks, or just this workbook, and we're just going to keep it in this one for now. And then the description, if it's a really complicated macro, which you could potentially start to get into, you'll need to describe what it does. So if anybody else ever goes into your file and needs to edit it, they'll know what they're looking at basically. And then I'm going to press OK on this. And as soon as I press OK on this, it is going to begin recording the macro, and whatever I do will be recorded. So I'll press OK here. And the first thing I do is going to be to click on cell K2, and it recognizes that. I'm going to go to my home page, and then I'm going to bold the word Excel. I'm going to italicize it. I'm going to underline it. I'm going to fill in the background red, and it is recording all of this right now. I'm going to go back to developer and stop recording. And now whenever I use the keyboard combination Control-Shift-D, it will make the cell K2 red, underlined, and everything else. So if I go to home right now and I just take all of these things out, put it completely back to normal, and then click on the cell again, I'm now going to use the keyboard combination Control-Shift-D, and it goes back exactly the way it was. Now what you need to notice here is if I go to the cell L2 and then do Control-Shift-D, it doesn't happen to cell L2. That is what this Use Relative References button is for. So if I type in Excel here again, and then I go back to my developer tab, and then I click on Use Relative References before I click Record Macro, and you're almost always going to want to click on Use Relative References. It will just use the active cell that you have. It will execute the macro on. So for example, if I click on cell M10 or whatever, it will happen to cell M10. If I click on O2, it will happen to O2. When I don't use relative references, only the cell that I did the exact same things to will be executed on. So to get right into it, I'm going to press record macro now. I'm going to want to start on my cell here. I'll name it macro 4. I'll go Shift A this time, why not? And I'll keep everything else the same and press OK. So it's automatically recording everything I do right from the get-go. So I'm going to click on my cell right now. I'm going to go to Home. I'll fill it in blue this time. I'm going to bold it, italicize it, underline it. I'll even make it a bit bigger. I'll go 24 here. And then I'm going to make sure that it fits in my column. And all of that is now recorded with relative references. I'm going to go back to developer and then press stop recording. And then I'm going to click off on use relative references. And all that's recorded now. So even if I go down here to cell N7 and I type in Excel, when I click on this cell and use my keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-A, it will happen to it no matter what. No matter where I go, if I do that, it will, everything that I did when I recorded, it will happen to everything else. But one thing you want to make sure of, because it can get really annoying really fast, is that you can't undo a macro. I can't go up to undo right now and click it. I can't use the keyboard combination Control-Z. It doesn't go back. So make sure you don't do it on something important that you'll want to take back later, or else it's just going to take a little bit of work to undo it yourself. So if I go to total compensation right now and do Control Shift A, well, now that's different than everything else, and I can't just undo it really quickly, and it's super annoying. And that is basically what macros are. As you get more in tune to Excel and you learn more, you're going to find better uses for macros, because right now it doesn't really seem that great. However, when things start to get tricky for you in Excel, and there aren't just normal features that Excel provides to do what you want to do, or there are really tedious tasks, macros are going to be your best friend. Now, before I end the video, I want to talk about VBA for a second, and what it stands for is Visual Basic for Applications, VBA, and it is the programming language Microsoft uses for their applications such as Excel, PowerPoint, Word, OneNote, and some others, anything else that Microsoft is the owner of. And with VBA, you can write the code yourself in Excel to create and implement features and processes not available using normal features, and you can do things that you can't even do with a macro. The downside about VBA, though, is that it can be hard to learn and to catch on to. It's a big learning curve for everyone who doesn't previously know how to program or code at all. However, it can be very helpful, and I would consider it the most advanced feature for Excel. However, I'm not going to cover it completely in this video because this video would go on for hours. I'm going to create another playlist explaining VBA and everything about it. And the great thing about VBA is that what you learn about it is transferable to PowerPoint, Word, and all those other applications. So make sure you stick around, subscribe, so you can see the playlist on VBA, which I will be uploading shortly. And in case you want to play around with it yourself before you watch any videos on it, it is also in the Developer tab. Right next to your macros, you'll just want to click on Visual Basics, and then you'll have this pop up. And I'll be going over all of this in my next video. However, in your modules here, if I click on that right now and I go to my module 1, you will see the macros that we created in this workbook. You will see the underlying code for them, which was selected. And you'll see right here, we did relative references, so it's always our active cell that we select. And when we didn't do relative references, it just put in that range of K2, And that is why the relative references is always easier, because whatever cell that you clicked on is considered your active cell, and that is the cell that the macro will apply to. And that's basically VBA. Once again, I'm going to be going over it later. And there's a bunch of other things in Excel that I didn't cover in these videos, and they're just little small things such as other functions, little shortcuts that might make your life, better in Excel, of course. And I just want to let you guys know that I post all of these on my channel. I have a whole series on functions, and I post shorts just about little shortcuts in Excel that are going to help you out extremely. Just please make sure to check out my other content. And that is it for me. I hope you enjoyed this 3-video guide. If you liked it, please subscribe, please leave a comment, and make sure to check out my next video.